So, folks, guess who is back on TGV platform? Amishi Seth. She was featured on our milestone episode number 450, where she covered a beautiful topic on Sanatan Dharma. That episode has received overwhelming response, and we are pleased to bring her back onto TGV. For those of you who have not tuned into episode number 450, it is a must watch or must listen episode, folks. So go ahead and search for it. And just to remind you and just to give you a brief background about Amishi Seth, she's a playwright and author with the 3 books published by Penguin Publications and Landmark. Most of Indians might have either seen or read her books. And her latest book, Answers to Sanatan's Biggest Questions for Teenagers and Young Adults, is under publication. She has been on Star Television Network's panel of experts to recruit new writers, and she was interviewed on the All India Radio as a playwright, author, and the screenwriter in popular children's properties like Chota Bheem, Krishna Balram, Luv Kush, among others. And today we are bringing you one controversial topic, or I would say a bold topic. And TGV is known for presenting such bold topics and also driving certain conversations which are worthy enough in order to create that sort of enlightenment. And TGV holds a discretion driving these topics, just the interest of the society, and there is no means in such a way that we hold the responsibility of driving these conversations. And listeners and audience are advised to consume the content diligently, and it is not to harm anybody's intentions or anybody's preferences or anything else. So on that note, let me announce the topic: WOKE, LGBTQ plus and Sanatan. And before we get into this interesting topic, here's an exciting twist as always. So let us tickle our guest's brain. And Amishi, get ready for a rapid fire round of random words, and I'll mention a few. And you are already aware of this particular format. However, the words will be different. So you have to again share with our audience, with me, the first thing that comes to your mind in response as and when I share certain words. Are you ready for it?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So here comes the first word: diversity.
Bharat.
Sanatan.
Hope.
Pride.
Hope for the world.
Hope for the world. Okay.
Pride, my country.
Equality.
Of opportunity for everyone.
Visibility.
Visibility need not always come from popularity. Identity is responsibility, community, togetherness, harmony.
Guru.
Inspiring.
Karma.
Will always come back. Will always come back.
Okay, here comes the last one: Dharma.
Dharma, the balance on which the world exists.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for participating in the rapid fire round. And before I welcome you again to the show, let me welcome the audience. So folks, you have tuned into TGV, and hearty welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series, where we embark on transformative conversations for a better future. Folks, the Guiding Voice is the world's only quadrilingual podcast, which is successfully running for the last 4 years. And our content is available in English, Hindi, Telugu, and Kannada. If you have loved this English content, I'm sure you will love the content in other 3 languages also. Do check out our podcast in other 3 languages as well. And I'm your host, Naveen Samala, dedicated to making the world a better place through valuable discussions that add value not only to your life, but also to your career. And thank you so much for tuning in. Amishi, hearty welcome to TGV, and good to see you back on the platform. How are you doing today?
Oh, awesome. Awesome. And thank you so much for having me here. And yes, this is very controversial, but it needs to be talked about.
Yep.
Thank you so much for that.
Pleasure is mine, and let's get the ball rolling. And we will begin with what is woke and what is wrong with it.
Woke, which is, you hear this word, being used often, and many people don't really understand what it means.
True.
Woke is an offshoot of Marxist communism. It's an offshoot of that. Of course, that communism theory has undergone a lot of changes and amendments and all of that. Ultimately, we had postmodernism, we had intersectionality, and then today we are at critical race theory. Now, critical race theory is called woke in colloquial terms. Yeah, one and the same. Now, what does woke say? Woke says that the entire world is divided. The people of the entire world are divided only in two categories. Category one is the oppressor, and category two are the oppressed. That's the only thing that is there. And it further goes on to say everything in the world, whether it is history, culture, tradition, science, logic, art, everything in the world, all social systems, all structures in the world were created by the oppressors in order to oppress the oppressed. So everything is a tool of manipulation of the oppressed. Now, what are the problems with this? This, in a nutshell, is what woke is.
Yeah.
What are the problems? The first problem is that it says everything in the world is wrong. Everything is biased. Everything is manipulative. A horribly negative way of looking at the world. As though nothing right has ever happened in the world. It's only inequality, it's only injustice. So it's a very, very negative outlook to the world. And if our youth get that, then where is the hope? As though nothing right has ever happened. So that is one big problem with. The second problem with woke is that because they deny history, they deny logic, they deny culture, they deny tradition, they deny science, how do you talk to them? So if I have taken a stand and you say, Amishi, it is not right, why? Because historically, don't give me history. History is manipulative. Okay, culturally, for so many, a culture is also a tool of oppression. So I don't believe in culture. So don't talk to me about that. Logic, who decides what is logical or not? So don't talk to me about that. How will you communicate with me?
Okay.
So, and any society where there is the communication breaks down, how are you ever going to resolve any conflict? So that's a big problem with woke. And I'll give you an example, a rather controversial, but I'll give you an example where all of it will tie in together.
Sure.
The third major problem with woke. So if you're going to deny history, culture, logic, science, everything, how do you decide who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed?
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide that, right? There are two ways in which that is decided. One, who is paying for the activism, and second, if you are a successful civilization, successful race, successful developed country, then you have to be the oppressor. And somebody who is not developed, who's downtrodden, who's struggling and all has to be the oppressed. Now, this in no way means that injustice has not happened. A lot of injustice has happened with a lot of people. Agree. But that you can't blanket all development and all success with that. A country who is successful, a race that is successful and developed and scientific and doing economically well, is doing it also because there are certain things that they must have done right. And who is not doing well, there has to be a sense of responsibility that's because certain things that we did wrong. So today, even if we look at India, Bharat, for example, we say all our ills have come from our colonial past, which is true. But we cannot absolve ourselves of the responsibility as to who allowed the colonials to take over. We did it, right? So we
Exactly.
can't run away from responsibility. We can't run away from our mistakes. But woke says, no, the louder you can cry your victimhood, the more we support you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's an ideology of victimhood. Everything wrong has been done unto me and I have no responsibility. So that's the third major problem with woke. The fourth major problem with woke is that it divides society. So for woke to survive and for woke to be relevant, it needs to look for the oppressor and the oppressed. The more it can look at oppressors, find these dual systems, the more woke has scope. So what are these whites versus blacks? Then black women versus but black women are different from white women. They are different from blacks as a race because that also includes men. And of course, they're different from whites. So that's another section there. So you can have a section. Recently, I was reading a report that BBC has said it's so unfair that 90% of train drivers in the US are middle-aged white men. Now, how is that even worthy of discussion? Okay. So it's only about dividing society more and more and more. So you've already broken down all communication systems. You have broken down all context. And now you divide society. The fifth problem with woke is that if everything is wrong, then how do you write it? You write it by destroying everything that is wrong. So what it means is complete chaos. It's complete chaos. And the fifth thing, how do we decide what is right and what is wrong? Because we don't have any context in terms of culture, history, science, logic, rationality. We've broken that down. How do we decide who is right and who is wrong? It's very simple. The only thing that matters is my individual experience. So I am right only and only because I think I am right. And if you do not agree with me, you're a bigot. Matter over. Yeah, so these are the major problems with book. Now, let me give you an example that
Okay.
ties it all together. And I remind your audience again here, this is not a platform for us to take side. Talking about the Israel-Palestine war, because there are a lot of protests all over America, all over Australia, Europe, Japan, and now they have reached Bangladesh as well. So I want to explain both to you only, take that example only in the context of war. Personally, I'm very clear on which side I am, but in the context of war. So what is happening is over thousands of students, hundreds of thousands of students in Ivy League colleges all across America and Europe, and now even Australia, Japan, they are protesting. They are protesting anti-Israel for the war to get over. Okay. Now the thing is, and anybody is welcome to Google this, they have found out that there are quite a few students on campus. Okay, the entire university machinery has come to a halt. No classes are happening, nothing is functioning. Okay. Commencements are getting cancelled, graduations are not happening, it's all at a standstill. Exams are not happening. So now in this standstill, okay, they have found out that there are quite a few students who don't even know what they are protesting for. They have come to it for the kick of it because it's cool to protest as per vote, right? The second part is that even for those who know what they're protesting for, which is basically that the war should end and Israel should be boycotted. Okay. Now, while all wars should end, that's a blanket thing. Wars should end. That's it. But in asking for the war to end, they have completely denied. Okay, let's say this war ends. What happens next? Because they have no historical context, they have completely disregarded the history that Israel was declared a state, independent state by nobody lesser than the United Nations way back in 1947. So the international body has given Israel the right to exist. They completely deny the fact that the same right was extended to Palestine over a dozen times since 1947. And every time Palestine has rejected. In fact, anybody is free to Google it. The charter of Hamas says that we don't want an independent state. We want Israel to stop existing. They completely do not have the historical context of why the Jews did not have a homeland or a country of their own. They have no historical context of why they regard Israel and the part around Jerusalem as their homeland. Culturally, traditionally, what is the history of Jews that justifies this piece of land as their homeland? They pay no credence to the fact that in the past, lots of wars have happened between Israel and Palestine. Every time initiated by the Palestinians. So many times, Israel has captured their territory and returned it to them later. Because Israel said, we want a peaceful state. You stay peacefully where you are. Let us stay peacefully where we are. So there is no context. Okay. They have completely denied all the for everybody to see. So now, without any of this historical cultural context, you are saying that the war should end. Okay. So what? Okay, fine. Let the war end. But what next? There have been dozens of wars between the two countries. Just ending this war, will it resolve the conflict? How do you resolve the conflict that has led to so many wars? There's no understanding of that. There's no talk about that. Right now, just boycott Israel. Just boycott. Okay. Now, similar wars are happening in Russia, Ukraine. No talk about that. Chinese and the Uyghur Muslims. No human rights things about the Uyghur Muslims. Nothing against China. Wuhan virus. No protests against China. So it's so selective. It's only Israel because somebody has funded going against Israel. Period. Human rights violation, liberties. What about women in Middle East? That has been happening for centuries. Their poor things are being undermined and their rights are being violated left, right, center for centuries. No
Right.
protests about it. And these kids, and I am very responsibly using the word kids, who are asking for this war to end, have not probably not worked a day in their lives. Certainly not in corporate life. Certainly not in government. And they are trying to blackmail the government into making policies of international geopolitics and economics and trade. Acha. Now, the Jewish students in American universities are trying to talk to these people and say, here our side of the story. Okay. You may think we are wrong, at least listen to us. They are not being heard. Students are ganging up against the Jewish students. And in universities like Columbia, which, by the way, are Ivy League universities, which are supposed to have the creme de la creme of intellectual and smart students,
Mm-hmm.
been calls in these universities for the beheading of Jews, all in the name of freedom and liberty and justice. This is woke. On a lighter note, let me give you one more example, which honestly would be quite hilarious had it not been so audacious. So, I think this also happened in Colombia, that the students in protest, so the police started removing them. So they laid siege to this hall called the Hamilton Hall on campus. Very famous story that the Hamilton Hall, they went in, they locked themselves inside. Okay, so they clamped up the doors and they put biking locks and all of that, and they destroyed the CCTV cameras.
Mm-hmm.
After that, so the authorities allowed them to do this nonsense because they said, "Ki chalo acha hai, let them be locked in a hall." After a few days, these kids will get sick and go home. So
Mm.
nobody needs to get, there needs to be no conflict. The authorities also stayed home. After a few days, 2-3 days maybe, the student representative comes out and she says, you know what? We need food and water inside. So the authorities didn't say anything. She said, unless, and look at the language,
Mm.
unless you are okay to let us die of starvation
Mm-hmm.
or of dehydration just because we disagree with you. Look at the victim card. Now, nobody asked you to go into that hall. Okay? You went into the hall, you broke the laws of the university, you damaged the property of the university. You want to change the world. You want to stop a genocide, end a war, and you forgot to take enough food and water inside. Okay? Now it is a responsibility of the authorities to keep you alive, to look after your needs, so that you can continue to have the chaos that was not permitted in the first place. So all your freedom of liberty is dependent on your oppressor. This is woke. I have only rights. I do not have any duties. So that's what. Do you see how dangerous it is?
Yeah. I got it. All right. So, Amishi, I think given that the conversation is going so deep, right? Maybe let us split this conversation into three parts. So, we'll stop the conversation here around the basics of woke and what is wrong with it. In fact, you have given us a lot of insights and you have gone very deep and made us understand what this woke is all about. So we'll take a logical conclusion here, and in the next episode, we will talk about how does this woke relate to LGBTQ plus. All right. So thank you once again for being part of the journey, and Amishi, we will continue the conversation in part two. Okay. So folks, that was part one of woke LGBTQ and Sanatan Dharma series. And before I let you go, in case if you haven't already subscribed to TGV, the Guiding Voice podcast, please subscribe to our podcast from wherever you have tuned in, because subscribing keeps you updated on new episodes. And also, if you have enjoyed this conversation and found it useful, please share with at least 3 of your friends or colleagues who would also like TGV, the Guiding Voice. So spread the knowledge and help others grow just like you. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and also for being part of our awesome TGV family. So we'd love to hear from you. Do not hesitate to share your ideas, feedback, topic recommendations, guest speaker suggestions either through social media Or you can also email us at theguidingvoiceforyou@gmail.com, and let's create content that resonates with you. I'm your host, Naveen Samala, a lifelong learner, and my goal is to have impactful conversations that improve not only your life but also your career. So until next time, take care, stay inspired, and remember the best is yet to come. Goodbye for now. See you all in the next episode, continuing the conversation on woke and LGBTQ.